Welcome to the Sound in Microsoft Products talk that Steve and Ben are going to be giving. It's been a long time in coming, but Microsoft has a virtual sound team, and it's been nice to have all the different groups actually communicating with each other. I come from Xbox and from game audio in general, and so getting some of the things that we've learned about how, because you're doing all this dynamic audio mixing, but how to bring that back over to the PC side and to portable and to basically everything that Microsoft actually delivers. I think it's great, and I'm glad you guys are...
Take the weight off of your shoulders, too.
Appreciate it. So, with that...
Beautiful introduction. Thank you both for coming. Ben, why don't you dive in and give everybody who decided to make time for this talk today an introduction to what they're going to...
Well, do you want to introduce yourself and where you come from?
Sure. My name is Steve Ball. I am a senior lead program manager in the Windows Experience organization. I have been hovering in and around Microsoft since about 1994 in various contexts and working on sound and music-related projects for Microsoft since about then. And I have a long and sordid history of the good, bad, and ugly stories of sound in Microsoft products over the past decade or so. And I'd love to share some of those with you today to help you not make the same mistakes that other teams have made over the years. And this is my colleague,
Benjamin Bethurum. I come from Mobile Communications Experience Group. I'm one of the few people at Microsoft who's not in the games group that has a keyboard in their office, which is very nice. I do all the ringtones and UX sounds for mobile and also other products. And I joined about 2 years ago. I was initially contracted, but then they hired me on and built a little sound cave, as I call it, over in 117. So basically, that's kind of my home base for support, and that's where I create and compose and arrange micro sounds. Clicks, 3-second notes, or 3-note, whatever. Anyways, that's what I do. Also a product designer for Windows Mobile and do all the personalization on the phones. Theming, sound themes, stuff like that coming out in the future. So this is obviously about sound today. Sound is all around us. It's in our appliances, it's in our ice makers, it's in our toasters. Sometimes they're physical sounds like metal on metal for that ding. Sometimes they're coming out of speakers from your cell phones, in your car, all over the place.
in your living room, your movie theater, the obvious places, and most apparently for most of us who work at Microsoft, it also pours out of your computer all day long from YouTube, from Messenger, from Office 14, and we're generally surrounded by sound that is very often unintentionally orchestrated to cause chaos and annoyance throughout our day. And part of our mission today is to look at sound in a new way and help you understand that you all play a role in reducing the noise that we have to endure every day.
So a quick agenda. We're going to do a little introduction to sound, talk about the purposes for sound in products, talk about how to talk about sound, which is probably the most complicated part about sound. It's actually speaking about it with sound, about sound. Talk about the principles of sound design. Steve will kind of go through some of the that experience on the desktop, that 3-foot experience with sound, and the principles there in scope. Talk about the process of sound design, how you can actually get sound into your product and kind of the complications there. And we'll talk about defining Sonic brand and the brand longevity. We'll kind of touch on the quick history of Microsoft's brand and the startup sound. And then we'll go to explain the Microsoft Sound V team. And we'll first be defining sound from the silence up. So, as Steve was talking about earlier, silence is golden when sound events outweigh the information they're presenting. Kind of like, hey everybody, I'm going to click to the next slide. If I had like a dink, 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 like you guys don't need to know that because you're watching this here. Now if you're all closing your eyes or turned around and you had to look back here every time I change the slide, maybe the sound would be nice. But basically when you have UX sounds that are there that outweigh the event they're presenting, they get annoying fast, and most people want to turn them off. Sounds obviously must have a function first. Definitely need a purpose or definitive need in products.
There's also a very clear language that has developed over the years that those of us in sound design have picked up on, but it hasn't really been formalized anywhere. And so part of our goal at Microsoft is to help formalize that language and help spread information about that language so that we can make more intelligent sound design decisions and not reinvent a new mail sound or the meaning of a new mail sound every time we release a mail client. It is, in fact, though, so ubiquitous and such a huge part of our lives that even the news buzzes around the idea that you can create your own custom ringtone for your iPhone if you happen to have one. And this is big news for the world, to be able to personalize your own phone experience with the sound. And this is just one example of the kinds of interactions that we have with sounds every day. Unfortunately, as we were joking before the presentation started, most of our own experience with ringtones comes from the interaction we have in a movie theater where you hear the Ring of Fire or the Aretha ringtone in a room full of people while you're watching a movie.
Or on a plane.
Or
you get off the plane, everyone turns on their phone, you get that whole chaos of all the mobile operators throwing out their sonic brand, da-na-na-na-na.
Or in a conference room like this, where you have 20 laptops open, and how many times, I wonder how many times you hear a startup sound during the day. I would say on average I hear startup sounds 3 to 4 times a day at Microsoft. Same is true out in the world. If you think about new mail sounds, pouring in at about 200 to 300 a day per person in this room, if your new mail sound is also turned on, it is now estimated that the new mail sound is played something like 60 trillion times a year, meaning that it is the most played sound in the history of music and sound. And if you think about the fact that most computers playing a new mail sound today have a sound that was kind of designed with a piano in mind, without very much intention in terms of its level, its timbre, or its effect on people, you might stop to think about why we redesigned the sounds in Windows Vista so that they would be transparent and less intrusive and about half as loud as the rest of the sounds that you'll hear pouring out of most modern computers today. Ben, tag.
Tag, Amit. So back to enabling the sound. Obviously, it's hands and eye-free interaction. Close your eyes, close your ears. No, you can't close your ears, actually. That's why sound works. The fact that your ears are always on, sound is intrusive. But that's the best part. It enables us to know things that are going on in the background. It's a presentation of information from a distance, and it's multi-channel communication. It also delivers a perception of quality, confidence, control, security, approachability, compatibility, and choice. It's, again, that emotional bond of the product. Back in the day, when applications actually were just beginning to actually have that capability of playing sounds, that's where that quality really came in. And that's where everyone was like, oh my God, because we can play sounds, let's load this thing up with sounds. Because everyone's like, whoa, your application plays sounds, right? Which just shows that quality, that cutting front edge area. But nowadays, back to being saturated with all these sonic icons all over the place, we have to really back off and say, okay, do we need sound here, right? Is there a definitive need?
There's some anecdotes as well about why we have sounds in certain places in Windows, for example. It is actually fairly controversial, but the startup sound in Windows has a practical function. And given the history of boot times, how many of you turn on your computer or do cold boot in the morning, assuming you actually cycle your computers occasionally, and turn away and go make coffee, or turn away and go do something else while you wait for 30 seconds to 5 minutes, depending on your OS or the stability of the build you're using. The boot sound actually gives you a chance to do something else with your mind and your body and your attention until the boot sound happens, at which point you can turn around and log in. So it seems like often we use sounds just for embellishment or in some cases arbitrary purposes, but sound in our products needs to have a function. It needs to actually transmit information that is useful, so it is not just arbitrary or annoying or presenting information that the rest of the world doesn't really care about.
And within those sounds that help us understand, when our computer's ready or when our printing is complete, that's where you can actually brand your product and from afar, people can recognize, oh, that's a Microsoft product, or oh, that's T-Mobile jingle somebody has on the phone. We have the same mobile operator, and connect to that brand story invisibly. So we're going to talk about the purposes for sound in products. We obviously touched on branding. That's the primary purpose for the actual sound design aspect of it. It's really associating that positive emotional response from customers in response to interaction with those elements of sound. Here's some examples here. You guys all know the Intel classic, one of the first real big sonic icons that Intel put tons of money in to really represent that brand. And Intel is invisible, essentially. It's in your machine. Yet they're one of the most recognized brands in the world because of that sound. And they had a real big problem saying, oh, how can we get out there and brand this microchip, which is very complicated and most people don't understand, but we want to make people say, oh, I have a better product because I have Intel inside my machine. So this sonic brand, I forget who actually composed it. You can check out, I'll send out a link after this, but there's this site called Tiny Music Makers. But the composer of this woke up one night and was like, I got it. Boom, Intel inside. So you can actually hear it say Intel inside through that note choice, through the rhythm. Right? Here's another one, THX. We all know and love it. Yeah, obviously it doesn't really feel like THX in here, but we all understand that, oh, hey, here comes some good quality sound, right?
Maybe.
That was actually composed via code. It was all done in, I think, C++ back in the day, through LucasArts, obviously, because they were coming out with a big sound experience for their Star Wars films, right? So they kind of wrote all these very algorithmic sound, swell from a bunch of different frequencies landing on a big chord, and obviously put it in 5.7.1 or whatever it was back then. And that really showed quality. So when people went into the theaters, saw this thing pop up, had a great experience, watched an epic movie, when they saw another movie and they saw the THX thing flash up on the screen, they knew that they were going to have an awesome experience, right? Another one, very interesting, right? Let's use a lion roar for our sound. Obviously power, strength, conveying that brand.
Fear.
This one we could all sing along. Okay, or not. Okay, we won't go through that whole one. But
Wasn't that one was retired, right?
then they brought it back, right?
But they brought it back for the first Star Wars movie, right? And that's why we
Yeah.
associate it.
20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20th century, so it was originally they were a News Corp, so it came from the old News Corp.
Yeah.
Weagles, that's when the sound was started.
And they used it for the first Star Wars film.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which was huge, and then they switched back to using it for everything.
In the identity.
Good to know.
And, can't think of the composer. It's like part of the song that became.
Albert Newman? Alfred
Newman.
Alfred Newman, Scott Selfin. So for those of you online who didn't hear that entire conversation, this sound has been through the ringer 3 or 4 times. It's gone from our consciousness. By Alfred Newman. Thank you,
Another
Scott.
brand sound, obviously in the mobility sense. Here's our competitors. Right? Do you guys know that one yet? Oh, you will. I guarantee it. It's the default out-of-box ringtone for the iPhone, right?
Sorry.
Listen for it.
Yeah, but see, here's the interesting thing. So is it complex? It works. It's percussive.
It's long.
It's long, and it's going to make people want to go buy some more ringtones, right? So there might be a function there, too.
Yeah. You hear it twice, and you're like, I think Sweet Home Alabama sounds better as a ringtone than that.
We all know this one. We all know this one. Okay, sweet. But it works, right? And it goes on for 30 seconds. Because that's how long the ringtone is, right? It's the T jingle. Classic use of sound brand. This one just got updated. I couldn't get this one, but yeah,
Yeah,
Duracell
technology,
quality.
analog wobbly tape
It's
sound.
now more of like this. It's very kind of
Synthetic.
hollow. And then, competitors beat up, obviously. So these are some good Sonic logo examples of brand. And obviously, if I was to take, I'm like covering the screen. If I was to hide all these things, you guys would be able to tell me what those were. Maybe not the iPhone, because it's not that great. I'm just kidding. But obviously, brand, from closing your eyes. I should have had you guys close your eyes and tell me what the sound was, right? Another purpose for sound is feedback, using sound cues to confirm completion or state of an activity. I'm not going to go through 100 of these, but oh, that's very quiet. Oh,
No, it's just very slow.
yeah, there we go.
It is very quiet also.
Very quiet. Actual Foley of like crinkly paper, less abrasive. Printing complete. Hey, go get your printer.
These are just generally a little feel-good confirmation that something that you initiated actually completed. And that can be very important for non-verbally letting you feel confident that what you did was actually completed.
Another big purpose is notifications, the intentional interruption of the user's foreground activity to notify them of something that requires their attention, or to notify them of a state. I'll give you another quick example.
Blue team, 30 seconds to win.
Right? Hey, you have 30 seconds. You better get on it and get the flag. That's from Bungie, obviously. Or another classic sound we all love.
I'm late for my meeting sound.
Oh, hey.
You're almost fired. So.
Okay. Obviously, go run to your meeting real quick. The other thing is sonification. Orchestrating sound elements to sync with graphical metaphors or user-initiated navigation to convey the sense of physics or reality to the desktop metaphor. I don't think we added any examples there.
No, but there are examples that we've taken out of Windows. One is the minimize and maximize sound for Windows, which is like sound effects or Foley for the desktop. And most normal people, after the second or third time of going, ooh, turn that off and don't actually find that to be useful.
Or the click sound.
Yep.
My girlfriend actually, she had this old computer, and she's a writer, so she loves to type. And this old computer, she'd turn on the keyboard sound of like, it would be like, tick, 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 and I was like, oh my God, really? Well, things. But she really liked to hear that rhythm of her typing, like as people would back in the day as journalists with typewriters. You get into the flow, you're just cranking away. But there's actual hardware sounds on the keyboard. And they think really hard about that actual physical contact sound, but she really liked that. And I was like, oh, wow.
The same is true
Really?
in hardware design. There are anecdotes about the sound that your mouse makes when you press down the button, and there's a reason that makes a physical sound. If you ever press or use a device where you press a button and you don't hear anything or you don't feel anything, you kind of wonder whether or not the action you initiated was actually confirmed. So building a click sound into a mouse or a keyboard or into your product, maybe a touch screen, for example, or a cell phone, can actually give the users more confidence that what they're typing is being accepted and being taken in.
And then obviously entertainment. Video games, a huge one. Having that score while you're waiting in the menu. Having that, all the other sounds with entertainment. Or, waiting in an elevator. Elevator music, people love it, right? Waiting in the lobby of that favorite Chinese food restaurant.
Hold music. In fact, I was on hold with Help Desk over the weekend, and our hold music is horrible. It is too loud. It was mastered too loud, and so it's distorted. And it is also, it loops in a very awkward way, like chops off in the middle and then sort of starts again. So those are examples of ways we interact with sound every day where there wasn't much production or thought put into the actual implementation or the experience.
Or there was, it just maybe needs to be updated.
Yep.
So again, here's some quick summaries of the types of sounds. Do a quick exercise. If I could get 5 of you guys
Are there 5 people here?
to commit.
We need 5 volunteers.
5.
All right. We're going to go with up close and personal. This is going to be really hard.
Really hard.
Scott, you're disqualified. You're too sound savvy. And you're on the same team. You don't count.
Maybe we should have everyone participate. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, Steve. We'll give you an out. There you go. Keep
So
going.
I'm gonna play a quick sound, and I want you guys to write down 2 words that you describe the sound as. Okay? In your own way. There's no wrong answers here.
Don't think too hard.
Here we go. I might even play it a couple times. I'll turn it up, actually. Let's see if I can. One more time. Just 2 words. Yeah, you can do that. That's a fair cheat.
I'm joining the competition as well.
Okay, cool. So, you want to share your words?
Thundery and backward sounding.
Okay. Thundery and backward sounding.
I just put backwards.
You said backwards.
Wow.
Excellent.
Digital and ominous.
Digital and ominous.
Approaching.
Approaching and gloom.
I said outer space or aliens.
Outer space or aliens.
Well, we were a team. So
Oh, cheating again. Steve.
Electronic toilet.
All right, electronic toilet. So,
And I'm going to read those all back to back. I may have missed one, but thundery, backwards, digital, ominous, approaching gloom, outer space, electronic toilet. Sound, dot wave.
okay, so did anyone, do you like it? Is it positive? Is it negative? Say again?
seems like Matrix.
Matrixy.
Matrix sound.
Matrixy, okay.
Where did
All
you
right.
steal that, Ben?
I didn't steal it. I didn't steal it. I made that.
Yeah.
I'm glad because, God, it was called electronic toilet initially. So, no, but back to talking about sound. When you're dealing with a client, it's a hard thing, especially when not everyone's a musician or a sound designer. I mean, I could be like, yeah, the mid EQs could use a little bit of dampening, and you could maybe use a soft compression on that lower end, or you could talk about attenuation, and a bunch of other things. But when you're talking emotionally, ominous, that's a word. It's too ominous. So what makes that sound ominous? Is it the big, thundery suction thing in the beginning that makes you affiliate it with a movie that you saw that had a lot of those sounds? Is it the minor chord structure? Is it the major chord structure with that diminished ninth at the end or something like that?
Or is it the instrumentation that doesn't sound human? Sounds like no instrument that you ever played in middle school.
Right, and you guys said reversed. You were able to pick it up right off the bat and say, oh, there's something reversed in there sucking around. And that was like a guitar, I'll play it one more time, actually. So there's something reversed in there. Okay, yeah, so there you go. So hearing that, you're able to pick out some small things and details. And saying it was reversed is an actual technical term there. Saying it's ominous or alien is, it's disjoint in some ways. So it's really hard to talk about sound when you actually are creating sound and moving through that process. So obviously you can talk about sound in a melody sense, right? The prominent voice of the sound, the most audible layer of the sound, the component you would actually hum. So how would you hum that?
Scott, could you hum that sound?
See, it's hard.
Everybody in the room, hum that sound?
So maybe the melody...
Bad.
So the fact that you can't hum it says that the melody is lacking, right?
Or buried, or atonal.
Yeah. How about the rhythm of the sound? Heartbeat, pulse, or cadence of the sonic item, a sonic icon. T-Mobile is obviously da-na-na-na-na. It's totally linear, right?
Or tell me what this sound is.
Yeah, there you go. Intel.
No
they
notes,
have
no timbre.
they have
no
the brand
orchestration.
purely in the rhythm, right? They've done it right. Right? So they nailed it there. That's all you have to do is clap, and you know the Intel inside sound. Awesome. Another one is coloration, right? The orchestration or timbre of the sound. The instrumentation and overall scaffolding of the sonic icon. As we said rhythm before, Intel's branded that. It's unique rhythm. I'd probably say the coloration of that last sound was fairly unique. You're obviously, if you're going to hear it again, you probably pick it out and go, oh yeah, it's that really weird, morphine sound.
The creator of the Intel sound also tells a detailed story about the fact that he layered dozens of instruments on top of each other to create that very distinct percussive sound. So there is layering that you don't even hear in some of these sounds as well that gives it a unique, distinct quality.
So you couldn't say, hey, that's a marimba, right? Okay.
Or just a piano like our Naked XP sound set, which is mostly pianos and orchestral instruments.
Yeah, that was an actual marimba. Yeah,
It's
you're
naked.
right.
Yep.
So very unique.
They're very basic because
Yep.
they haven't made it into this complex
Yep. Which
And
has
actually,
advantages.
and complex sounds in the mobile space are actually hard to render on like a small piezoelectric speaker, right?
You could also argue that the most primitive sound in the world is probably a caveman with a stick beating on another stick. And so there's probably
Woodblock.
something very universal about a wooden sound that you don't get out of a synthesized sound that sounds intimidating or something from a Western
And then, as Steve said before, density, which is how many layers have you used to create that sound? Obviously, the sound that I showed in the example was very dense. It had a lot of different timbres and sounds moving together and morphing around. So that's the kind of way you can talk about sound with a client and say, it's too light. Just that marimba is not enough for me. I want more orchestration, I want more notes choice, more melody. I want it to be denser. I want it to be thicker or heavier.
Or I liked the color, or the coloration, or the orchestration, but the melody made me feel depressed. Or the rhythm was great, but the melody was boring. There's ways to talk about the elements of a sound independently so that you can actually give the sound designer a clue about what you like and what you don't like about a particular sound, instead of saying, more green.
Yeah. Or, could you make it a little darker but a little lighter?
Which I think is an exact quote from 3 or 4 meetings we've had.
Yeah. Yeah, we want it really pretty.
Or the famous Mozart quote, less notes.
Yeah, too many notes. Okay, so we're going to jump in. We'll do quickly principles of sound design. Obviously, sounds always have context, right? If you're in the movie theater, they want it to be big and bold and huge. So it's a different context to sound design than if it's a ringtone, because you've got 30 seconds there. Or even your refrigerator, bing, or microwave. Steve Ball has done a lot of work in the desktop client case, so he's going to talk about some of the principles that he follows in sound design.
So there are some general principles that we can apply to product design in general, but this is mostly thinking about software sound design. And so this is sort of a laundry list, almost a little bit like learning about the golden mean or learning about color theory. There's a few things you could pick up that will help you have more intelligent conversations and make more intelligent decisions about what is necessary in your software products. Number 1, sound actually spans from 0 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz, and that's a very wide range of pitches from very low notes to very high notes.
Well, it spans higher than that, but that's what we can hear about.
More or less.
20K.
In fact, the best sounds that have longevity and that you don't get tired of have a very strong mid-range component, it's called, and they just feel and sound like a relatively calm person was giving you some information. Instead of a stressed out person whose voice is higher, or someone who is down a football player, telling you 2 octaves below any human speech sounds that something has happened. And so we want to keep things sort of in this comfortable both range and tone. Secondly, long sounds like the Verizon sound, was that the one? That was 30 seconds long?
Well, but that's good in context.
The T-Mobile sound. Should be short. In fact, hearing the Apple ringtone, it's pretty long. I'm not sure if I would want my ringtone to be 7 or 8 seconds long. In fact, all you really need for a sound is a very short amount of time to convey the information that you want to get across. So,
but from the mobile guy over here, I'll debate that and say that.
Good.
It should play out a long time, because if your phone's across the room, you want to make sure you don't miss that phone call. So in context of the mobility space,
Yep.
you want to make sure you kind of fill up all those gaps for the ring. Some people do prefer like smaller ringtones.
Yep.
But in the desktop client case, you don't want like a 30-second sound telling you have an email, right? Or a meeting reminder.
email is here.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That was
you don't
good.
really need that. 2 very quick notes, about 800 milliseconds should be about enough. And this is something that we really put a lot of attention to in Windows Vista. We took all of the Windows Vista sounds and we made them about half as loud as every other sound that's ever been in a Microsoft product. And the effect of that is that when you go into a large meeting full of people and people keep their sound on, the idea is that email will be just barely noticeable, and it'll be loud enough that the person sitting at the laptop will hear it and be able to respond if they need to, but no one else will be disturbed. This is also why all of the edges of the sound in Vista are kind of soft and rounded, like the Aero glass windows that you're running on your Vista machines. Finally, we're also very interested in making sure that we don't reinvent the meaning of a sound every time we shovel a new sound into the box, which is why the Windows XP new mail sound is one very specific interval that we didn't reinvent in Vista. Same pitch and the same notes are used for the new mail notification. And finally, this may also be really obvious, but we want to make sure that the sounds, unlike that electronic toilet sound you heard earlier, don't become obnoxious and annoying the second or third time you hear them. So the sounds, by definition, that are repeated over and over again need to be pleasant enough that they sound as good the 100th time you hear them as the first or second time. And this is a very hard design challenge. There's another set too. The sort of inverse of that is that unless you want a sound to be alarming, like a fire drill or like
fighter jet.
Or a fighter jet,
Missile lock.
Or a Halo weapon, which you might actually want to be annoying, or a Harley-Davidson bike, which you might actually want to use to annoy your neighbors. The idea is that you want to avoid alarming or distressing sounds unless that is your intent. If the sound's purpose is to wake you up, then by all means make it alarming. We also advise cautious use of speech, and this is ironic given that we just acquired a company called Tellme, whose entire business model is based around the idea of using speech in our user experiences.
I bet they have a fun time back in the day localizing that.
Yeah, in fact, one of the primary reasons why we want to avoid using speech in Microsoft products is that localizing that to 40-plus languages or 100-plus languages, let's say, in 10 years, is non-trivial and very labor-intensive. However, there are times when the only way to get something done is via speech, which is really Telme's secret sauce. To be able to call somebody at Microsoft and use your voice to tell you their name and have an automated response back that sounds pleasant and intelligent and like it is a human is also a very useful sort of interactive use of sound. But there was even a trial in, I think it was MSN 8, where there was a voice prompt that came out and greeted you when you logged on to MSN 8 for the first time, and it said, "Hello, Scott." And again, I think it was Polish.
Funny story. Back to my girlfriend.
Yep.
Oh, I'm just kidding. But her mom had that whole thing going on, and her name is Deborah. And it would always say, Deborah. "Hello, Deborah." And she called and tried to get this whole thing right. Or even typed in her name in different ways. And that's like the perfect case scenario where speech is really hard, especially synthetic speech is a whole nother gamut. But Deborah, like the worst thing you can do is really mispronounce somebody's name. And if it's a computer doing it, it's a
slightly offensive.
Whole nother deal.
Yeah. Thanks, Bean. That was a great story.
Yeah, good one.
Repetition is also obnoxious. In fact, there are well-documented cases in the game world where Scott comes from about big attempts to avoid repetition so that the same gunshot that you're shooting over and over again does not sound like a 1950s cartoon where the background is running by Fred Flintstone every 10 seconds. So there are things you can do in your product design that involve doing intelligent triggering of the sound or doing intelligent leveling of the sound the second or third time your ringtone plays or the second or third time your click sound plays so that you don't annoy people with repetition over time. And frequent sounds also can evolve over time. This takes more programming, this takes more intelligent sound design, but if you do hear something over time, a great example of this that spans decades is the NBC logo. Been reorchestrated dozens of times. Likewise, some of the NPR themes you hear every day. Morning Edition B.J. Liederman has done multiple orchestrations of some of the NPR themes. And that can be another way to give new life to a sound by changing its color or its orchestration without changing the rhythm and the melody, which generally define the trademarkable distinct components of a sound. And finally, this is really why we're here today. At Microsoft, we release hundreds, if not thousands, of products. And part of our goal today is to do a wake-up call across the company and say that wouldn't it be nice if the sounds that came from Microsoft had a constant bar for quality and had a look and feel and brand association that we could be proud of and didn't sound like we were a mishmash of small companies all fighting to get the loudest sound into our products. And so A little bit like the way we use 4 colors in our Windows flag and in our Office branding, our goal and our icons as well, our goal is to reach out and help provide some unity and consistent quality in Microsoft products by centralizing a little bit of both the oversight and brand awareness for sound in our products.
So now I'll talk a little bit about the process of sound design. So let's say you have a new product and you decided, oh man, wouldn't it be killer if we had sound in here? And you decided, you conversed around, you had the dev team ready, you've costed it out, and you're like, okay, let's get some sound in here. So there's obviously a need for sound, everyone's bought off on this. So now you go and you request it. You're like, okay.
Hey, Grandpa, I heard you used to be a musician. Can you make some sound for our product?
A lot of people do that. Or, hey, yeah, I've got this wicked aunt who plays the sweetest harmonica ever. Wouldn't that be cool? Okay, anyways. So you go and you find probably a sound design team. Or you ping an alias and eventually all the mail stops at your inbox or my inbox. That's why we're here today. That's kind of how this whole virtual sound team started was, oh, I heard Windows Mobile has some sound resources. Oh, I heard Steve Ball used to be in the tip sound. So it always comes back to us. That's why we're friends. And we kind of ping back and forth emails to find out, who can take over what for sound. So anyways, you get the request. Maybe us or another sound team out there.
Or a third-party sound design firm.
And then it's our job to obviously get into the product understanding, right? Define the functions of the sound. Do you really need, some crazy sound for some crazy thing? Or does it actually provide like a function to the end user?
Does your app need a startup sound? Can you imagine every time you launched an app in Windows if it had its own startup sound?
Office! Okay, then you have to define the stage, right? If it's hardware, you have to say, okay, what kind of speaker are you using? In the mobile world, it's a whole other game for sound. There's so much mastering that goes into it to get the sounds to sound good on a speaker this big, right? And the irony thing, the ironic part about mobility is the fact that small speakers play really high sounds very well, but really high sounds, in a digital audio sense, cost more memory, and mobile phones don't have that much memory. You want to keep the BOM cost low, so you kind of have to find that mid-range and that perfect balance. And
I think in Windows it's even more complex, given that a Windows startup sound might have to play on a laptop with $1.50 worth of speakers, or in a 5.1 surround theater with a giant subwoofer and high volume sound playback as well. So
you always want to define the stage when you're starting the design process. Then you want to document the scenarios for the user, right? When do they need to hear the sound? That comes back to that define and the function. And then you go into the branding. What is your product about? Is it entertainment, right? Is it a video game? Is it Surface? Is it a little more interactive? Are you looking at this device all the time? Is it your Xbox 360 wireless headset where there's no visual feedback unless you're syncing it, right? And you want that volume up, volume down, or you're on or off, or you're losing battery, right? And then you go and you gather, right? After you kind of know the scope of the project, you gather a bunch of sounds we feel fit the brand and keywords of your product. And you kind of make an emotive soundboard. And from that, you usually get a good team of people, PMs, people you trust that have good ears. Guess have good ears? No.
Had good ears.
Had good ears. Or get some sound designers in there to start talking about the sound, and then you go and pick out some sounds from that emotive soundboard or an archive of sounds that you have. Then from those sounds, you design kind of the first iteration of a bunch of other sounds, and you go through this process continuously. Pick out more sounds that fit, throw out the sounds that don't, go into design 2, design off of those sounds. It's definitely the same creative cycle as visual design even. And this can go on for a long time because the way you talk about sounds. Maybe you guys say, I want that sound to be a little more childish, but your perception of childish sounds is different from my perception of childish sounds. That's why we talk about talking about sound in different ways.
There's another aspect to this cycle too, which is that generally during this first stage and the second stage, you're just educating your audience about how to listen and how to talk about sound. So a lot of the process of playing, maybe 20 or 100 or 500 sounds for a team of lawyers, marketing people, developers, product designers, is just getting them to develop a common vocabulary so you can say, you know what, this one is better than this one. And when you get to phase 2, you can actually say this one is better than this one because this melody is better. And then by the time you get to stage 3, you can say this one is better because the melody, the rhythm, and the orchestration all reinforce our brand message and make us feel good. But back in the beginning, if there was only one stage of this process, you might get an arbitrary sound that is a cow mooing that becomes your sound because the first time Jim Ulchin or an executive heard it, he said, "That's funny, I like that one," and then your job is done. If it were that easy, you wouldn't need this iterative process. But this is actually how we go from quantity to quality until finally...
And you come up with a lot of thrown away sounds. It's kind of like building a house. You have a lot of materials and you throw them away, fortunately. Greenhouse is a little different. But with sound design, I have archives and archives of sound. I just did the click sound for the Front Edge team over at Zune a couple months back. And you're like, okay, a click sound, right? Okay, so what do? You make a click sound. It's a lot harder than you think. You got to get it in front of a lot of people's ears. And obviously, a lot of people are going to hear click sounds quite a bit. But it's part of that interactivity and that emotional connection to the device and your interaction. Literally, I probably made about 800 click sounds for that team over there. It's crazy. But then we found the right one, right? And then you ask strangers, and they're like, yeah, that's good. That's a good click sound. And that's all you want. You don't want to be like, yeah, that's the sweetest click ever, because you just want it to be in the background. But there's a lot of thought that goes into that whole iterative process.
Scott, how does that compare to game sound design? How many iterations do you typically do, or does a game sound designer do in getting to final sounds for a game?
It depends on the kind of sound. If it's like the branding sound for the game, like the weapon at the time of the game, they'll do tens, hundreds of iterations. With games, a lot of times it's different because you don't want it to ever repeat. So you not only have to come up with a cool sound, but you come up with 25 or 30 different versions.
Variations.
Randomly chosen.
Yep.
So cool. And that's an immersive experience, which is it's totally different, where you usually get the 5.1 system. You definitely have stereo speakers, right? Very cool. Yeah, I want to tour your studios. So then you come up with the main sound. Everyone's kind of signed off on it. Or, at the end of the day, you've got a deadline, and you're like, okay, this is the best sound. Let's go with it. Then you kind of go into production mode. So there's the product. Put the sound in the product, obviously. Beta tests, everything else. And then you start tweaking it. Treatment, right? This could be like compression, mastering, everything else. Oh, that sound is too loud. Or that one specific gun sound is like 5 times louder than the other sound.
This red cross is intentional, by the way, because this part of the process is a lot like triage. Sometimes there are bloody arguments. And often it's a charity project because the cash that the team paid has already been spent and used, and now you're just trying to get some convergence to make the sound work in the product.
Right, and this is that fit and finish of the sound. Put the sound back in the product. And, it melds so well. You like that? A little PowerPoint action? I was going to do a gunshot sound, but I decided not to. Okay, so then, obviously, you get the sound. But it's a long process, even for a click sound, if you want to do it right. We'll quickly touch on developing a sonic brand, a little history of Microsoft's startup sound.
So let's just actually begin playing through these. Most of you will recognize these from years and years of hearing this low bit rate sound that was commissioned by the Windows 93 team and shipped in what became Windows 95. Brian Eno was... There is an interesting analogy between the graphics in these sounds and the sound themselves. And if you look at the Windows 95 logo, the Eno sound is a little bit pixelated. It's low bit rate, and it is made on some DX7 synthesizers, which were very primitive. If you look at the Windows 95 logo, there's a nice tie-in. The sound actually maps to the graphic brand value. And if you think about what happened in the Windows 98 logo and listen again to Ken Cato's sound,
you probably know Ken Cato over in the he's got the
fairly
studio.
Pixelated, and now there's also a weird DSP effect that somebody discovered and applied to the clouds from Photoshop to make a new Windows 98 logo out of the Windows 95 logo. So there's kind of an analogous evolution of both the sound that maps to the graphics. The real peak then goes to Win2K, and if you listen to Win2K, you have digital toilet flushing sounds. We've kind of lost the flag completely, and now we've got a weird person diving off of a cloud into kind of a pixelized logo pool down here. And again, the sound does actually map to the graphical value, and this is the most extreme example.
And keep in mind, sound design is also, it fits like, it's like 80s music, really fit in the 80s, and it kind of comes back around now and then, but
Yep.
that was 2000. That was hot in 2000.
Yeah. Woo. Windows XP brought us into the era of bliss, and we went to a guy named Bill Brown at one of Hollywood's most famous sound design companies, and we shipped a desktop that was a literal rendering of a field, photorealistic, and it maps very well to pianos and orchestral instruments with a nice sort of cadence, 7 notes, distinct, and again, the sound brand maps very directly to the desktop experience. Windows Media Center team, Bill Flora and Joe Belfiore's team, and Steve in the room also launched a sound that was an application launching sound, and I was sort of ridiculing the idea of every app having a launch sound, but there are certain applications, it's specifically applications designed to run in the living room on a 5.1 speaker system that are meant to be a splash sound that means you are transitioning from a 2-foot experience to a 10-foot experience where a brand sound is appropriate. And this was, again, the Sound Deluxe team from LA. So this is just a little quick history of where we've been in Windows. And last year we landed with Windows Vista and a sound design process that was really a textbook Microsoft sound design project that involved lawyers, executives, developers, press, bloggers. And this was our Windows Vista startup sound. Translucent, rounded corners, meant to be completely analogous to the Aero design principles, authentic, energetic, reflective, and open. And there was so much controversy around this selection and this process and this project, even down to October 11th last year when this sound was chosen. And this went into the product 3 weeks before RTM. And now for the next 10, 15, 20 years, as long as Windows Vista is alive, this will be in, today I think something like 80 million machines. I hear this sound probably 3, 4, 5 times a day wherever I am. Even on the connector bus last week, I heard this sound. So it's amazing how ubiquitous this sound is. But there's one lesson to take away from this project that I want to share with you today, and that is the design of this sound was entirely dependent upon one element that was unclear from the beginning of this project, and it goes like this. Let's just play it and show it to you. This sound was designed to accompany an animation, a 4-frame animation that plays before your graphics card is actually available in your machine.
4 frames.
4 frames, and it's, I think it's about 1.5 seconds long. And we spent about 8 months designing and trying to choose and doing the process Ben described of starting with hundreds of sounds and moving down to final selections before we even knew what this animation was. And so one of the best things you can do as product planners or as PMs or as people working on integrating sounds into your project is to get the graphic design done first so that you can then design a sound that will map to and mirror the graphic experience. If you do it the other way around, you're going to have a much more expensive and complicated process.
How do you guys do it in the games group? Do you guys actually just push and pull?
It's ideally actually, so for something like this where it's pre-cooked, audio can be post-production, where it is great to do it after visuals, but in game design,
in context, constantly.
yeah.
Yep.
If you,
Just in case. Can you hear that on the
just
camera?
for posterity.
Okay. Say that again, Scott. That was pretty important.
Yeah, I was going to say in the game space, if something is canned, if something is pre-designed, and you're going to have like a movie or a cutscene or something like that, then sure, audio can be post-production, which is the way it is in other in linear media and TV and radio and stuff like that. But in game design, it's really important for audio to be involved from the beginning, because a lot of times audio is so dependent and can influence other parts of gameplay, whether it's enemies hearing you, whether it's your gunshot. The power of it is based on what power-ups you have and things like that. So we try to get a lot more participation earlier, but unfortunately that does mean a lot of times that you're creating sound and you have nothing visually to go on except for storyboards or concept art or something like that. So.
And the moral of the story is plan your sound design late enough in your product cycle so that the designer can actually work to the vision or the graphics or the actual animations that they are designing for. I think the same is true with your Zune work. If you had to design a click sound without actually having the navigation to play with, or Steve in Media Center doing a click sound without actually seeing what it does to the buttons, you're just shooting in the dark and wasting money.
There's always stuff too when you're doing prototypes, especially with hardware, because you might not actually have the physical hardware. You're doing it in context of a prototype, which might be a flash demo or a Silverlight demo or something like that.
Good save.
But then you translate that to the actual product, and the perf might be different, the memory constraints might be different, the speaker set might be different. It might just not work. Hence, 800 click sounds later, right? But when everything gels together at the end of the day, you can really push that product from an ordinary experience to something that's extraordinary, that people actually emotionally connect to.
And this is really worth some emphasis. Our goal is to help you take what could otherwise be just another Microsoft crappy, poorly designed product that gets beat up in the press and by our own peers, and translate that into something that people are proud of and that you have an emotional connection to and that you are not embarrassed by when your app makes a sound in a public place. We want to help raise the bar and tell stories with our products, have function baked into the products, and finally personalize it so that your ringtone is something you had some both control over as well as some emotional connection to, and we're not just shoving Johnny Cash down your throat if you don't want.
There'll always be a default ringtone, but at the end of the day, if you allow the user to customize it themselves, maybe even your messenger sound, that's really the future of sound, is allowing other people to sonically represent themselves in a product.
And that's a great translation, I think, into sort of the last step of this presentation and discussion. Ben and I have formed a virtual sound team that spans both divisions and product teams. And we have representatives from legal, from Brad Weed's design team in Windows, and we are actively seeking your collaboration in working with you on the products that you're building today. Why? Here's a bunch of words to explain it, but the bottom line is we want your stuff to sound great. And we want to help you accomplish that goal.
And we want to make sure you're not taking to the cleaners outsourcing sound as well, because that can get expensive really fast, as people well know. Making sure it's all cohesive within our products, and kind of, we're not here to like set up our territories and be like, yeah, we're the sound guys. What we're here to do is just say, hey, if you need an ear or a helping hand in the design process, and
even if you decide to outsource your sound design, we can help with things like figuring out how loud should that be, or what format should I use, or do I have to extract the text that my authoring tool automatically embeds in my files before I shovel them into a Microsoft product. So there's a lot of subtleties about putting these assets into your product that you may not even think about even when using third parties. And I think to wrap up, here's a quick list for those who want to look at this deck later of some of the stuff that we've done, and some of the projects we've worked on in the past. And maybe more interestingly, here's a list of some of the things that we are currently working on and some teams we're currently engaged with, some of whom are even in the room. So if you go to the next slide, Ben. We're currently working on Windows 7, which is my project, and Jennifer and a small set of us within the WEX division are working on building some sound schemes and themes that will be part of the Windows 7 vision. That'll help, again, with personalization and localization.
We're actually going to map that to Windows Mobile 7 too. That's not in the slides, but I support Windows Mobile 6, all the different targeted audio devices. I do different sound packs for them because each device is targeting a different demographic of user. But we're actually hoping to do like this fun like desktop mobility one big resource of sounds and like actually have it translate between the products of Windows Mobile, which is Windows Mobile, and actually the Windows 7. So that'll be cool. Office 14, represent.
Also, the Live Messenger team is doing some pretty significant stuff with sound in Wave 3, so we're working to help them get some stuff in their release. Response
Point was a cool project. That just finished up. If you guys have heard about MSR's big program, but it's basically hardware device. It's like a desktop phone. Thanks for coming. A desktop phone for small businesses that have like 30 people, and they wanted to really sonically brand that experience when you press the hardware key and it pops up and gives you that prompt of like, say who you're calling. They wanted to do all this sound for that product, and it's cool because the UI is completely, auditory, so kind of like a tell me system. But that was fun. Obviously Zune, and supporting tomorrow, PowerPoint, people, contact us. Live Messenger, Signature Sounds. Popfly just contacted me yesterday. They wanted to make sure that they had high-quality audio. The keyboard team just contacted us. I'm not sure if that's a hardware thing. That's going to be interesting. We're getting on that tip next week. And then,
most importantly, if you have needs, we'd love to hear from you.
As long as it has nothing to do with games, because that's him.
And we'll point you to others
it's a whole other game.
Part of our V team as well, if you do need music for a game or even music for a presentation or event. We get random requests all the time to figure out how to get music for
internal
events
videos.
Presentations.
Yeah.
There is a call to action for you, and this is not a request. This is actually a demand that we're making upon you today. We want you to be smart and help us educate your teams and your peers and the people you run into at Microsoft and in your product teams for the next 10 years so that we can all work together to raise the bar. And here's our contact information. I will also say one other thing, which is if any of you out there are active sound designers, our V team is not a closed club. The dues are high, the pay is low, and the hours are very long. But this is the Give month, and so this would be a good chance for you also to extend your contributions to charity, of which the Sound V team is in some ways a charity.
Go through that iterative process whenever you want.
Yep. So come join us, come talk to us, and contact us via those email aliases if you want more information or have feedback.
Cool. And thanks for coming. Questions?
Q&A?
About the Zune click, you said, we found a few strangers and they thought it was really cool. So I'm a researcher. I want to know about how you get to the next iteration through any evaluative processes, more formal evaluative.
More formal, like user experience. Well, beta testing is key. Well, obviously, it's hard. You can't really bring in, especially with Windows Mobile and ringtones and stuff like that. It has to be qualitative, really. I mean, that's the key. Right now, Zune was a tough one. That was more front-edge team full of a bunch of designers and a core group of people who just had a sense for it. And when we all locked in on something, we moved forward and went to the next iteration, locked in on another one, went forward, locked in on another one, and then slowly we came up with like about 8 different sounds, and we all had really one that we all really liked that really fit the feel of the product. And then at the end of the day, we kind of just asked people blindly, and they were all targeting in on that one. So it was. We actually put them in context of the prototype. We had people walking by, because really a blind taste test with anyone, especially with sound, because it's so subjective, is sometimes the best. And this was a really quick process. We'd literally pull people out of the hallway and say, "Yeah, come check it out." And we just, check out the UI, whatever else. And they're like, "Yeah, it's a good sound."
There's a danger with that, though. I'll tell 2 quick stories about Windows Vista. We actually took some of the very early Windows Vista brand sound candidates to a theater in Los Angeles where there are knobs built into the seats of the theater, and we played these sounds a number of times, and we measured the response. I like it or I don't like it for some of the candidates, as well as for the Intel sound and a few other well-known brand sounds, so that we could kind of have a baseline. And we brought that data back and studied it, and again, we didn't make a decision based upon that data, but it helped us understand one very important thing about Windows. When you have 1 billion users, it is impossible to make everyone happy. And we discovered that there is a very clear sort of IT aesthetic. If you're an IT guy, you love the NT sound, generally speaking. If you are a salesperson, Windows XP, it's orchestral, makes me feel good. And we realized right then and there, mostly from this data, that our sound was going to be impossible to please everyone. And so it also gave the team working on the sound a little bit thicker skin so that when some random person on the street or some executive said, I don't like that sound, we could actually help put that comment and that feedback into context and help us make another decision about what the right brand choice was, not trying to figure out how to make an executive happy. Second story is that for all the inbox Windows Vista sounds, we also did some usability tests, and we let people self-host these sounds, first a small team and then a wider team, and then we had them fill out a survey after a little while of living with the sound so that we get some longevity tests. And we tweaked the final Windows Vista inbox sounds based upon that feedback. And we actually threw out a few sound events that didn't actually test well because no one liked even, doesn't matter what the sound was, just that event with that sound, with any sound, was considered to be obnoxious. And that's another example of like minimize and maximize being removed from the product or just unwired from the product.
And then more the personalization tip in Windows Mobile where it's all ringtone based, and I'm sure all of you have totally different ringtones from one another, where it's very subjective. It's always best in context to test sounds, so a lot of dog food goes out there, and when people type their answers and everything else. But we also have this online portal where people can download, preview and download, and we get a lot of data from that. Is if they previewed the sound and didn't download it, then they didn't like it, right? Or they only listened to the first couple seconds and they already judged the sound. Or, and then if they downloaded it and a lot of people are gravitating towards specific ringtones, then we know that that type is working for our end user or the end user who ends up downloading ringtones, right? So it's always skewed all over the place, but there's always a lot of tests that go into it.
And there's definitely tools and resources we can point you to and examples of tools you can use to help remove some of the subjectivity from your own analysis.
But again, back to context. That is the key. Like, even testing the boot up sound in the theater is like you're already kind of skewing your results because it's not that 3-foot experience where you're opening up your laptop in an office, right?
Or asking someone from North America if they like a sound compared to India or China or Brazil. We're very U.S.-centric when we go door-to-door asking each other questions about whether we like something or not. We're trying to change that with Windows 7 by doing some more localization of our themes and our sound schemes.
And back to mobile, when I started working for Windows Mobile, I made all these very elegant, very subtle, very like low-key ringtones. Because most ringtones are like abrasive and like rah, rah. But they just didn't test well in context because people weren't able to answer their phone or they weren't waking up to their alarm clock because it wasn't abrasive enough. And that was like the first obviously context again is king.
Yeah.
So
or the monster truck kid might not care that Robert Fripp made a beautiful startup sound.
Yeah,
he might actually want some obnoxious disturb my parents sound to help
that
him.
comes back to that whole personalization through sound, which is I think the really interesting part of the future of sound in products is that idea of personalizing it. So it's pretty cool.
Great question. Any others? All right, thanks again for coming.
Cool. Thanks again.
We'll see you again or hear you again shortly next time you hear a startup sound.